Ahoy, mateys! Episode 24 of Divinely Uninspired. We just had to redo our intro because I hit record and I thought it wasn't recording, and then it turns out it was. So I'm just explaining how podcasting works to you. But I don't like that I start the podcast every time with, hey, welcome to Divinely Uninspired. So my new catchphrase is ahoy, mateys, until I decide that I'm going to change it again.
Okay.
So we are here, as always, with our fearless leader, Jeremy.
Hello.
Hello.
That's it.
Yeah, great. It's good. That's your catchphrase. And joining us is April. Hadn't been here in a while.
Hello.
Wearing Jesus is my jam shirt
That's
with a boom box on there.
It's my new favorite shirt.
Is it?
It is.
Oh, jeez.
Yep. I'm going to wear it all the time now.
Okay. Are we allowed to call those ghetto blasters? Or
I don't care whatever you
is
call
that
them.
wrong?
I don't get
That's
offended.
Probably wrong.
Wrong. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
we can edit this section out. But when I created the video for our mixtape series, I downloaded some stock footage, and the stock footage actually said "white guy dancing with ghetto blaster" on the stock footage website. So
Okay, well, maybe not.
Yeah. I say go with it.
Leave it.
okay, all right. So yeah, if we get canceled, it's not my fault. And that's the voice of Penny. Penny is with us.
Hey, everyone. I'm not really sure what's happening here.
If we get
it's all messed
canceled
up.
because of that, apparently they've never listened to any episode, because I feel like every episode we say at least one thing, the reason we should be canceled.
That's probably true. Hey, we completely dropped the ball 2 weeks ago when we released an episode because we have reason to celebrate, because Divinely Uninspired has officially turned 1.
That's so crazy.
We have done a full year of podcasting, and I got to thinking, and it gets old saying Divinely Uninspired. So I decided we're just going to use the acronym DUI to talk about our podcast.
That's
So,
great.
Yeah, because it's Divinely Uninspired. So DUI. And so if you're driving, you're driving with DUI. And welcome. We're so glad. Hey, we got a lot to talk about. We got some fun stories. We got some tense stories. We got some stories that Jeremy is going to inform us about. And we're going to have a good time. But first things first, here's our song. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're listening to Divinely Uninspired, podcast by Journey Church Shepherdsville, hosted by Jeremy Willis and me, Rusty Wilson. You can find us online at journeyshepherdsville.com. For questions or comments, email podcast@journeyshepherdsville.com. Maybe we'll feature your question or comment on a future episode. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the show. So I really, really want ghosts to be a real thing. Not for any like spiritual reasons or anything like that. I just really like the idea of disembodied spirits floating around and causing mischief and being naughty. That's my new word too, naughty.
Oh,
so
no.
Just
I like naughty ghosts. And so there's this story coming out of the UK about this pub, this historic pub that is all of a sudden, after converting itself into an Airbnb, there's ghosts turning on jukeboxes and throwing mugs across the room, or beer glasses pints across the room. Would you stay at a haunted pub, Jeremy?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't believe in ghosts, though, so 100% I would stay there.
Yeah. So what if you were staying there and the jukebox turned itself on to a song by a band called The Stranglers? Because that's what happened. Would you be freaked out?
No, I'd be like, well, that's pretty neat. Jukebox is broken.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Penny?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess so. Why not? I mean, it seems like the ghost is kind of mad that it turned from a bar to a Airbnb. So, was it a bed and breakfast? My bad, right? It was a pub that turned itself
well, it's
into
still a pub, but it's above the pub. The lofts above the pub are now bed and breakfast.
I just kind of like want to see a ghost, maybe like that's maybe died in 2010 as opposed to 1855. Like it'd be cool to see a newer,
like a millennial ghost.
Yeah, that'd be great. You know what I'm saying? Like
She's
always,
a millennial ghost.
They're like, boo.
with their man bun.
Boo.
Yeah.
like start texting
I'm
me.
here to scare you.
Man bun. That's great.
Man bun.
I got my degree in art history.
I'm here to scare you, but I'm really tired now.
I feel kind of apathetic about the whole thing,
Oh my
honestly.
gosh.
What about you, April? Would you stay in a haunted pub?
I would not go looking to stay at a haunted pub. I don't believe in ghosts either. But if I stayed somewhere, I guess, and later found out it was haunted, then. But I'm definitely not going to go searching.
I mean,
for
you don't have to go anywhere. Just go upstairs because everybody here thinks that upstairs is
It
haunted.
is not haunted.
Me and April are the only ones that don't think it's haunted.
It is ridiculous. It's just an old building that makes weird noises.
Yeah.
So this pub is quite old. The building itself dates all the way back to 1446. So that makes it like 700 years old,
Somewhere around there.
roughly. And the owner he claims that it's even older than this, but he is convinced that there are ghosts because keys have gone missing from locked rooms and people have seen things float. And I just think that,
Well, like, here's my problem with this, though. So if I can be honest, like, if there really are ghosts, so this is why I don't believe in ghosts, wouldn't they be haunting everything? Because think about how many people have died. Do you know what I'm saying? And so, like, why is it only these few places
that are haunted?
And it's only like one ghost. I mean, this building's 700 years old. How many people have died in that building or died around that building? Or, I mean, there's been wars, and so it's like, how come it's just one ghost? And why isn't every building on that street haunted? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's always been my problem.
Maybe he's just been drinking too much at the pub, and who knows?
All right, so I'm going to read what the owner has said here. Jeremy Sterling of 62 of Canterbury. He says this. Hello, Governor. It's mostly been in one room. We've also had 2 sets of car keys, which were in a locked room and never accessed by our staff go missing. No, sirree, Bob. There was no rhyme nor reason why the car keys went missing, and we had one lady who was sitting in the room watching TV and water glass exploded on the side. It turned Australian. Another time, a woman said she was lying on the bed and the glass flew and hit the wall. Governor, cheerio. So the experiences range from missing car keys from locked rooms to exploding glasses.
See, I'm calling hoax. So here's my thing, because I think this is just like when those people see like the Virgin Mary and stuff, like the toast a couple years ago where the Virgin Mary. I think it's a marketing thing because here's the thing. After this comes out, lots of people are going to go to that place. He's going to get more business than he's probably ever had because people want to see that stuff. They want to believe that stuff is real, whether it's like these miraculous things from God or whether it's ghosts. And so, I would still go because I think it would be pretty cool. And it's a pub. So I want to go to a real English pub. But
this one's the Maiden's Head in Canterbury. And you can also stay there if you want. And so you can have a pint and then go upstairs and sleep it off.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move right along into something a little more substantial. And, I always, I was raised by a single mom and I have 3 sisters. I don't have any brothers. So I was always around fairly spiritually inclined people. And they just all tended to be women. And the church for a long time globally, really, women by and large have been more spiritual or religious than men. But the tide is turning because a new study has come out that shows that with Gen Z, women are now no longer more religious than men. And it's not that close of a spread. It's not like a single percent point. It's like 7% points. So let's discuss.
You're looking at the women in the room?
Yes.
Let's discuss women.
Yes. Ladies.
I don't know. That's interesting. I'm kind of shocked by that, honestly, because even in college ministry growing up, like the ratio of women to men was insane. So like anytime a single guy walked in, like all the girls would be like, ooh, you know what I mean? Because, they're just, you didn't see a lot of guys. So
still kind of the case. Yeah.
That's what I think. I don't know if I believe this article.
I know.
Well, keep in mind that it's not the millennial generation. It's not the Gen Xers. It is specifically Gen Z that we are seeing the numbers flip. And I think that you can read the whole, it's a long article and there's tons of charts and, the smell of many leather-bound books. But what they're saying is not so much that more men are coming to church, it's that more women are leaving the church. More women are are leaving the faith. And I think that we've seen several scandals within the SBC and things like that, that would give a lot of credence to why women are leaving the church kind of in mass.
Well, and I feel like women, especially with Christianity, we feel that it, even from the 50s and forward, it feels like Christianity was an identity, right? It validated why women stayed at home and took care of everything, took care of the kids. And now it just seems like a lot more females are finding their own pace, and maybe they feel that the connection between religion, Christianity, isn't really necessary anymore, I guess. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's why. Maybe there's just less of a need for that cultural identity in them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think too, like if you study like especially the last 100 years, you had this section of, the church where women, there was a good run where women kind of did like dictate the things that were happening
Right.
in the church, the way it looked, a lot of the feelings. I mean, the songs, even, like, you can study this. It's not me being sexist. Like, it's just part of it. And then, the article talks about it. There was this shift probably within the last, 2 decades where it did become heavily female. It seemed like for the most part, we're attending church. And so there's been this push to like get men more involved. And I do wonder if we've gone too far with that. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And that now women are starting to feel like, well, my church is just focusing on men. They're just doing these things for men, and we live in a world where women they have more rights and freedoms and, power, it's probably not the right word, than they probably had in history in our country. And so to go somewhere that seems to be focusing just on the men, do you know what I'm saying? I don't know if, and that's not all churches. That's just kind of a trend that I'm seeing, and to be honest, men have had a pretty good run in church. Like, I don't know, like 2,000 years of pretty much dominating the thing.
Right.
So, I think it's okay that women kind of had their moment where they can come in and speak. And, for some historical reasons, that was the first time women had a voice in the church, was the last, 100 years.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I don't know all the details of it, but yeah, I think in Christianity, you see with all things, there's a pendulum and it swings back and forth. And so, it seems to be swinging towards the men, but who's to say in 20 years it doesn't swing back? Or it sounded like, based on the stats, it's kind of getting to where it probably should be, which it's 50-50, so I don't know.
Well, do you feel like it's 50-50 in your home? Like, or do you feel like you are the one that, I'm talking to April, by the way, to see, is it in my home? It is me. Like, I feel like I'm the one, that's like, we're going to church on Sunday because I work here, but it's still.
No, not really for me. I mean, Aaron definitely, I think we were probably more traditional, you know what I'm saying? In our roles, I stayed at home, you know what I'm saying? Obviously up until I started working for Journey, but he has always been very much like, we're going to church, kind of thing. So not in my house necessarily, but
Yeah.
interesting.
About, I guess it was probably 20, 25 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. There was this big push that if you get the husband, you'll get the rest of the family. And I wonder if, like Jeremy said, if that hasn't sort of backfired. And well, you got the men, but in the process of getting the men, you created a culture that lost the ladies. I don't know. Maybe.
And I've seen that work where if you get the dad, it seems like, and I will say it seems like, because I think part of that too, the statistic is, my understanding of it is, women got tired of dragging their families to church. And then also you get to that point where, and I've seen families that deal with this, where the kids get old enough to where they're now like have a voice, and they're like, well, why do we have to go to church? Dad doesn't go to church. But then you do get the dad involved and it becomes less of a struggle, and so now the whole family seems to be going. So I don't know if where that, and I've seen it where, yes, if the husband is excited about church, there seems to be more consistency. But is that just because it was the man leading it, or is it just because now there's no longer that fight of, like you're saying, Penny, like, we're going to church today,
Right.
And so that made it easier. The other side of it, and I don't want to get anything political because we're going to get to that here in a few minutes.
No, we're not.
But no, I mean, but I do think that, with everything going on, we've already covered, the issues going on in our country right now and some of the things that have been said. I'm wondering if women feel like they're not valued in the church as much because of some of these political things that are going on. And like I said, has the pendulum swung, a little too far to where, and now women don't feel like they're being heard in the church again, maybe. And I don't know.
It's kind of weird too, though, because we do see more women in leadership now. At least I do than I did growing up. You know what I mean? Like you would even still when I'm
but
out.
they're in leadership as long as they stay in their role. And it's like Beth Moore a couple years ago, the moment she gets bold and says something, and I don't care what your feelings on what Beth Moore said, but the moment that, I mean, she was the shining star in the Southern Baptist movement of female leaders. And the moment she decided to say something that some guys didn't like, I mean, they axed her quick.
She was told to go home.
I love Beth Moore.
So, I mean, and I'm not trying to get into that whole, I'm just saying like, is there some of that where, there are women that have been in leadership, but as long as they stay in their place, I mean, that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they don't, then they step out of it, and now there becomes this storm. So I don't know. I mean, it is fascinating. I mean, anyway.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, it looks like we need to start doing women church where only women are allowed to attend.
Yeah. It's called Wednesday Night Bible Study with April.
That's it.
Don't we do that?
It already happens like every Wednesday.
That's true.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's have a little more fun before we jump into a pretty serious discussion. So there is this pastor up in Brooklyn, and he claims, and this was apparently live streamed as it was happening, that he and his wife were held at gunpoint and robbed of more than $1 million worth of jewelry while preaching his sermon. And his name is Pastor Lamar Miller Whitehead. He goes by Bishop. And his wife and 8-month-old child were held at gunpoint by some men in masks who knew of the different types of jewelry that he had on. So the thought is that these people knew who he was and knew what he was inclined to wear. And if you look at the picture of him, he is decked out in some pretty spiffy jewelry and clothing, and so the other side of this though is this guy. He went to prison in 2006 for identity theft fraud. And he is also currently being sued by one of his parishioners for stealing $90,000 of her money. So the story is that she was having a hard time securing a mortgage because of her low credit score. And he said, well, if you give me your money, I'll get you a loan. And she gave him $90,000, and she alleges that he took the $90,000 and used it as a down payment on his own house, which is a $4.4 million mansion in a very high-end neighborhood in New Jersey. And that when she addressed him about it, he said that anything I receive that is not linked to a contract is a donation. And so she said we had a verbal agreement. He also claimed that he was going to give her, and I'm not sure, this didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but she alleged that he was going to give her $100 a month to live off of. And I don't,
there's so much wrong with this story right
It
now.
is so bad.
It was did you actually watch the video of the live stream?
It was gone by the time I found the article.
Okay, so I saw the article and started to watch the video because you could see the men like coming up. Very interesting though, but I don't know. I have a lot of questions.
But he was during a sermon, like he was preaching on a Sunday morning.
Live,
they just walked on the stage.
Didn't they say there was only like 20 to 30 people present?
Yes, it was a very
small.
small.
What is happening? You could see what he was wearing. Like I don't know. Like to me, it's kind of like your flash. I mean, not that it's right either way to take it, but
here's my thing. If you're wearing $1 million worth of jewelry and you live in a $4.4 million mansion, you can't hire no security.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that would
what else is he doing to make that money?
Yeah,
I mean, obviously there's a lot wrong with him having, but what I'm saying is like, if I'm wearing $1 million of something anywhere, I mean, I my whole outfit right now, I think costs $45, you know, like literally, I mean, and so
mine
it's
might
like
be 20.
Yeah. So it's like,
that's
just because I have Nikes on. So really if you take away the Nikes, it's probably like 15, but like, I just can't imagine, you know, like, why do you need that? Why would you wear that publicly? You know, $1 million, you know,
that's a lot of jewelry. That's like some
and
Kim
if he's
Kardashian.
only got 20 to 30 parishioners, how is he even affording this?
Yeah.
Like
that's exactly
he's into
my
some
point.
shady business. He has to be. And when you read the article, like more articles that on that story, like he's very much into the prosperity like
Oh,
gospel
gosh.
and yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
it's-
and you wonder too, like, I mean, I just see, I don't know the details, but like, was it even real jewelry? Like, or was it
Yeah, I
fake?
don't
And he's
know.
trying to claim that it was worth $1 million
Oh,
to
maybe.
get the,
yeah,
you
I
know-
wouldn't put it past him.
except that he's disputing that it was not $1 million worth of jewelry. He said, and this is a quote, just to clear things up, I know CNN has reported, and also the New York Post, that over $1 million of jewelry was stolen. That's inaccurate. And then he adds that it was closer to $400,000.
Oh, okay, $400,000.
That's just
yeah.
better.
So it's
Yeah.
it's alleged to have been that much.
Yeah.
So the bigger thing that that's all, he addresses the, I'm allowed to buy. He says, it's not about me being flashy. It's about me purchasing what I want to purchase. It's my prerogative to purchase what I want to purchase. If I worked hard for it, I can purchase what I want to purchase. So that's his stance on that. My bigger concern is this poor parishioner who, based on the promise of her pastor that he's going to help her secure housing, and he used that money for his own mortgage, a $4.4 million mansion in Saddle River, New Jersey. And this is the description. The premises is a large palatial estate with an in-ground pool with a waterfall, outdoor fountains, hot tub, gym, and wine cellar, among other luxury amenities. So he's doing quite well for himself. And maybe it's by ripping off his parishioners. So
Yeah, that's really interesting. But I would think would she have some kind of document or something? Like
is this-
$90,000 is
Okay,
a lot.
first of all, that got me too. She has $90,000 but a low credit score.
Yeah.
Is that
Well,
not weird to you?
Yeah.
Nobody? That's weird.
It's weird to me.
yeah, and it said that she had been through some serious surgeries. So who knows if it
Okay.
was like a medical settlement
Right.
or
and
something
she got
like
some
that.
money. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair. Didn't
No
think
matter
about
where
that.
the money
Right.
came from, he lied to her about what he was
Mhm.
going to do with it. And so I feel so terrible for this woman. I hope she wins her case against him. So
she is actually an illegal.
oh yeah, she
Okay, well, that's
is
good.
suing
Okay,
him.
I was
Yeah.
going to say she should.
She should sue him for $1 million.
Yeah.
She should. Well, he would say it's only for $400,000.
Yeah.
So anyway, I want Jeremy to start sporting jewelry on stage.
I do. I wear an Apple Watch every week and a rubber wedding band.
Oh, okay. Well,
Did you have a pink one on Sunday?
It's orange. It's right here.
Oh, okay. See,
So
thought it
when
was
I
pink.
ordered a new one, I lost one in the ocean. We went to beach camp. So I ordered it and they said, if you will give you a bonus one for free, it ended up being orange, but I actually kind of like it. So I
Okay.
keep wearing it.
Okay.
There you go.
fun. Okay, let's get into something a little more serious here. So, you all know who Marjorie Taylor Greene is? She is a
Never heard of her.
Okay, she is a congresswoman. She's gotten pretty popular with a certain demographic of the Republican Party. She is a Georgian congresswoman, and recently in an interview, she said that she is a quote proud Christian nationalist, and that we should be Christian nationalists. The direct quote is this: "We need to be the party of nationalism, and I'm a Christian, and I say it proudly. We should be Christian nationalists." So she has been fairly problematic with some of the things that she has said and done, not from a purely political stance, but from a stance of just for human rights and decency, honestly. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this, and we're not really going to discuss this before Jeremy gets to tell us what he thinks. But this idea that America should be a Christian nation. So, Jeremy, tell us, what do you think? Should America be a Christian nation? Why or why not?
What does Jeremy think?
So I think before, I don't want to get in, although here, we just talked about this in the office. So I do want to say this. I think when Christian nationalism gets brought up, people should educate themselves on what it is. That's the biggest thing, because it's not necessarily a Republican versus Democrat thing. It is a whole new ideology. And there are certain things that they believe in. I'm going to say some of the things that they hold firm, and you may agree with that, and that's fine. So I'm not going to give my point of view, but like one of the things that they believe is that the founding documents of our country were divinely inspired, that they were basically given to the country by God. Okay, so that's one. The other one that they believe, and I'm just telling you what they believe. You can look this up. This is not me making this up. Another thing, Christian nationalism, is that they believe that only Christians should be the one making policies in our country, and that only Christians should be able to hold seats in, in our government. So, and you may agree with that. You may be like, heck yeah, but that's just, and they're dogmatic about it. And my thing has always been, and I hope people understand this, anytime somebody gets dogmatic about something, all the red flags start going off in my head. Like, why are we doing this? So that's what Christian nationalism is, not a Republican versus Democrat thing necessarily. It's a whole ideology, and there's many more. I think they have 5 things that you have to align yourself with, and you can study this. And just to let you know, it's not me. There are many Christian leaders across the country, prominent Christian leaders, more educated than I will ever be, who are voicing opinions about the warnings of this. And it's leaders that we should be listening to. So anyway, so that's Christian nationalism. Just educate yourself on it and then decide whether you agree with it or not. I'm still probably going to like you either way, but that's just what it is. So before you start writing emails or something, just understand what Christian nationalism is. So, but here's what I want to talk about, and here's what I want us to talk about together. When people say Christian nation, my first response is, what do you mean by Christian nation? What are you saying? And so if you're telling me Christian nation is where we only have elected officials who are Christians, and I do think that people should vote their conscience and their morals. I'm okay with that. And you can say, I'm only going to vote for someone that is a Christian. I'm fine with that as well. But here's what I will say, based on our last article we just discussed, just because you're a Christian doesn't make you a good leader. And I think that is where we have to start separating some of that stuff. Just because you're a Christian, we just had a guy this, just took $90,000 for this poor woman. I could list for 15 minutes all these major moral failures that have happened with Christian leaders, prominent Christian leaders, just in the last decade. And that's just within the last decade. So that is the one thing I would say. Well, what do you mean? So for me, the other side of it is anytime a country decides that a religion, and I'm a preacher, so I believe in Christianity and what it can do in this world. But anytime a country decides that one particular religious group, which goes against, by the way, our founding documents that these people say are inspired, is freedom of religion. You know what I'm saying? So that means that you're free to choose whatever you want. But anytime we have nations that are ruled by the church, and just so you know, we came from a country that they did that, and it did not go well. The Church of England ruled England, and that was also why many of the early people came to America, is because they were being persecuted, even though they were Christians to some degree, by the church, because the church kind of ruled the state. And here's the sad part, and this is the warning about history I think we should notice. You go to Europe now, you go to England now, those churches are empty. Like, it failed, and it failed miserably. We're sending more missionaries to European countries, and especially even England, than almost anywhere else, because it failed miserably. So that's just you do what you want with that, but that's just the warning. And there's been other countries like that. There's been Italy was like that. I mean, the Vatican's in Italy, and it's one of the least Christian countries in the world. Ireland, I mean, they're still bombing each other over their, religious views of who should be in power and all this stuff. So if you say Christian nation, what do you mean by it? Now, if you're going to say that the Christian nation in your mind is a country that is being led by Christian ethics, and when I say Christian ethics, here's what I mean. The ideas of loving one another, putting the needs of one another first, meeting the needs of one another, which is kind of what the early church did. You can read Acts. And then I love what Andy Stanley says in his new book, Not Ed to Win It, doing it without grumbling and complaining. Now, if you're talking about that we're going to love each other, we're going to meet the needs of one another, we're going to put the needs of one another first, and we're going to do it all without grumbling and complaining, then I'm all for a Christian nation. But if we're talking about anything else, then I think that we're going to dive into some territories that there's going to be hurt feelings, there's going to be arguments. I mean, we talked about it in the office. You just can't even talk about politics anymore because it gets so bad so fast and people get so angry. In his book, Not in It to Win It, which is one of my favorite books I've read in a long time, Andy Stanley says this. He says, how we treat, talk about, respond, and care for one another is the identifying mark of a genuine Jesus follower, not what we believe. And so if we're saying Christian nation, and we're saying that as far as we're going to love people, we're going to serve people, we're going to meet the needs of people, and we're going to do it all without grumbling and complaining, then I'm all for a Christian nation. But when we start getting into just the political realm of who's making policies and all of that stuff, and again, I will say all day long, just because you're a Christian does not always make you a good person, and it definitely doesn't always make you a good leader. Now, you might get to go to heaven one day, but that doesn't mean that you need to be down here, creating your own kingdom down here. And so that's what would be kind of my response, is just people checking themselves that when they say these things or they think these things, what do they actually mean by that? How are they defining that? If you're just saying a Christian nation is a country that's ran by one political group or one political ideology, then I can't get behind that. But if you're saying that a Christian nation is a nation that is guided by these principles, and I think that, I've said this before from the stage, to me, the biggest mark of someone that understands Jesus is how you respond, not to those you agree with, but to those you don't.
Mhm.
And I think that that is where we have gone so off the rails when it comes to politics and Christianity in particular, but really any religious idea kind of working together. So that's my thoughts on it. I'm not going to say whether I'm for or against it, but that's just kind of how I feel about it. So any thoughts? I got more comments, but
That was deep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good. I saw something. I think it was Michael Bird and Ed Stetzler. Am I saying his name correct?
Yep.
On
Stetzer.
Twitter. Thank you about that a few weeks ago. So there's definitely other people that have thoughts on that too. So it's very interesting. But yeah, I mean, I liked what you said. I would agree with that 100%. So I don't like to get into the political aspect of it either, just for the division. But I think if you're going to claim a Christian nation, then it needs to look like Jesus and not what,
But don't all religions generally have the idea that, you treat one another fairly, you love one another? I mean, even an atheist lives a moral life, right? That lives by the golden rule. So how is that really any different?
Well, I think that's what I'm saying is that, okay, first of all, so let me get into the practical part of it. When I say what I said about like that, the ethics of Christianity, what I mean by that is we're never going to have a whole country of all Christians.
Right.
That's not, you know what I'm
Right.
saying? I think Andy Stanley makes the in that book, he talks about this idea of when we become so consumed with running America versus saving America. Then
Yeah.
and when I say saving, I don't mean saving America like we're going to save our country. I mean like we're worried about the Americans themselves. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Mhm.
Versus the country as a whole. When you become more focused on the country as a whole, the identity of the country and what people think about us than the actual Americans that live within that country, then we're going down a bad
Right.
trail. Does that make sense? And so you're never, I mean, and I've said this before, study it for yourself if you don't believe me. And that's the other thing is part of Christian nationalism, sometimes they just write their own history, which is concerning. Most of the founding fathers weren't Christians. I mean, they really were. We've been taught that, but that's actually not true. Freedom of religion is that anybody can practice their religion without the government coming in and enforcing things. And, as long as it doesn't, and it was fascinating when you see the amendments to it without harming anyone else, including their health, which we want to get into health and all that, but that was just an interesting kind of add on. So no, I think when I say that is when Christians come together and instead of trying to vote one party or vote around one issue, it's just that, hey, and you're right, other religions do the same thing, that we come together and we say, we're in this together. We're all Americans. We're going to do this. We're going to love each other. We're going to meet the needs of each other. And I think that is, if I can be honest, is one of the biggest concerns in light of the article we just read, is it seems like more Americans, and I would also argue more Christian Americans, are worried about meeting their own needs than the needs of other people. And I think that is when we shift that and we start thinking about, the definition of love is putting the needs of someone else before your own. Okay. And then that's displayed by Jesus. So when it comes to politics, when it comes to our ideologies, are we really putting the needs of other people before ourselves? And I think that we don't do that at all, to be honest with you.
Well, also Christian nationalism isn't that the inclusion of like the 10 Commandments in the court and all that? Does that not include
No,
any of that?
I mean, they talk about that, but the biggest thing is that the original documents were divinely inspired. And so, I mean, they treat that, I mean, it becomes religious text, which is fascinating to me because of what some of those documents actually say that would argue against what they're trying to push. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There is a big, and they would never say this, but if you start reading, and it's all out there, you can read it, just,
we can link some resources.
yeah,
in the
but
show
I mean,
notes.
when I say that Christian leaders these are some of the most prominent, respected Christian thinkers in our country. And like Ed Stetter's one of them. And they're like, everybody needs to stop, and you need to read what these people are actually saying and doing, because it's very concerning, and they would even, Andy Stanley's new book, and you can have your feelings about Andy Stanley, but everybody should read it before they make an opinion about it.
It's a great book.
Like, I mean, he brings up so many good points. He doesn't ever actually talk about Christian nationalism, but he brings up so many points about our hearts and minds as Christians in America. And so anyway,
well, I'm glad I've said something, because I have a feeling other people are probably thinking the same thing, like having God in schools and the 10 Commandments and, the pledge,
which
all
is
that jazz.
Like, even for me, someone who tends to be far more conservative, like I argue about that all the time, because I'm like, I don't know that should be in schools. You know what I mean?
No,
Just
I think that's the point of freedom of religion is that, and you can read all this stuff. It's all available and different. Don't go to like Fox News websites or CNN websites. Go to actual like
Associated Press.
Sources. But like when it comes to like freedom and religion in schools, the danger of that, and I've always told people this. I mean, I've been invited to start Bible studies like in curriculum in schools and stuff like that, and I said, that's great. But the moment we start doing that, now we're opening the door to everything else that's going to be taught, because we have to. That's the way it works.
We did a story on it last year where a Satanist group in Missouri wanted to start an after-school Satan club because they had an after-school Bible club, and people were up in arms. Oh, how could you allow that? And it's like, well, that you're allowed to. And
here's what I'll say. So I think a lot of people will probably hear this and be like, yeah, we should, people get so up in arms about this stuff. And let me make this statement very clear based on my understanding of the Bible. Jesus could have came and started a political movement, and he chose not to. Every movement, for the most part, that has changed the world, including Christianity, did not come from the top down. It went from the bottom up. It went from the slums, the ghettos. It went from the oppressed. It went from all of these people rising up within society. One of the things that I see in America is, even though I do stand firm to the idea that, all of our founding fathers were Christians, and even the idea that the country was based on Christian principles. Some of it was, some of it was not at all. I mean, we can study that for history. But Christianity has always, in some degree, been a place of power here. And that is the adverse story that we see within the movement. And so, there are guys that are writing books that are basically saying, like, does Christianity in America have to break before it's ever going to save it again? Because it has to be coming from the bottom up, not the top down. And I think that we live in a world, and you can have your views on it and disagree with me. Most of the movements in the world that have changed the world never start from the top. They start from the bottom and they rise up. And so I think that is the great warning from history that we need to pay attention to, that if Christianity is going, and I believe in the hope that we have in Christianity, and I do believe that it can save America. And when I say that, I mean Americans. I'm not worried about the political side of it, but that rises from the bottom up, and it rises from people saying, okay, time out. Like, yeah, we've got these people elected, but like, it seems like there's more division in our country than ever. So what's going on with that? So anyway, so that's just my thoughts and feelings, and you can disagree with me, and I'm okay with that. I disagree. I mean, it's how you treat people and respond to people you disagree with rather than you agree with that I think matters the most.
Well, and I think that's part of the problem, is that we have gotten to a place where we see people who I disagree with as not fellow Americans who I have a difference of opinion with, but my enemy. The person who votes in opposition to what I vote, they are not another human being with a valid opinion. They are my nemesis. And that idea of seeing everybody who you disagree with as your enemy it's not only unchristian, but it's un-American. The unchristian part is the more important part. But the whole idea of America is that we can be different. There has never been a country as diverse and multi-ethnic as the United States of America.
It was referred to as the Great Melting Pot, the Great Experiment. That was what these early people called this. Like, they called it, like, it's an experiment. It's a melting pot. It's, and I do want to do this one quote, and then we can talk a little bit more. But I love this quote because Tim Keller wrote it, Andy Stanley used it in his book. But Tim Keller is smarter than all of us combined and anybody listening to this combined. He says, when the church as a whole is no longer seen as speaking to the questions that transcend politics, and when it's no longer united by the common faith that transcends politics, then the world's seeing strong evidence that Nietzsche, Freud, and Marx were right, that religion is really just a cover for people wanting to get their way in the world.
Mm.
And that is one of the best quotes, and you can look it up. We probably need to link it in the show notes, because that is what Nietzsche, Freud, and Marx said about religion. I mean, like we are plastering on the wall what they said about us. And it's insane. And it's like for Tim Keller to have to call that out in us and be like, look, we're taught, the church transcends all of that. And
I think he tweeted that a few weeks ago, if
Yeah.
I remember.
Well, and when you consider, all of this, and then you look at our article about, there are fewer women in the church, and not only are there fewer women in the church, there are fewer people in the church who identify as Christians just across the board. The numbers are going down, and maybe it's because the experiences of so many people have been a syncretism of Christian nationalism showing up in the church, in the faith communities that they have grown up in, and they say, well, I can either participate in this or I can reject it. And so I guess it's not palatable to me anymore, so I'm going to reject it. So I all of this, I mean, we are not going to solve the problem on this, but Christian nationalism it's a threat to the viability of the church.
let me say this: Christians are not a threat. It's this idea, because I wanted to hear people to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that even people that vote their conscience or their morals or vote a certain party because it aligns more. Christian nationalism is the threat, not Christians
absolutely.
in America or Christians voting their conscience. That's
Right.
not the problem. It is this ideology. And that's why I said people need to educate themselves on it and to see, because like even we were just talking about, like when I started telling you some of these tenets of this movement, you were like, well, I don't believe that. And I'm like, I know you don't.
Yeah.
That's where people just need to read about it, educate themselves on it. And then,
But just because something has Christian in its name doesn't mean that it's actually representative of
Oh,
of
absolutely.
Christ.
Yeah.
So let's do something fun. Everybody go around the table and say who they voted for. Let's do it real quick. Everybody.
Mum's the word.
No,
easy.
He said easy.
Okay, we won't do that because we don't want to alienate anybody any more than we may already have with my Ahoy mateys, or that we are now the DUI podcast. But a few announcements for you. So that was what Jeremy thought.
That's what Jeremy thought.
Always fun. I like that little drop. We have some exciting news. Our new student minister, Kyle Breuer, is here, not in this room with us currently, but he will be on the podcast in the coming weeks. But we're really excited. He has moved here from Colorado, and first Sunday was this past Sunday. He's a good dude. You'll get to know him more, and be sure to stop by, say hello, send him a Hallmark card. Yeah, just let them know. August 7th, parents, Move Up Sunday. Your kids, if they are moving up from a previous class to a higher class, Kira will be in contact with you about that if she hasn't already. And that includes the 5th graders moving up into 6th grade. There's a parent meeting for you that day. It's for all student ministry, but you are invited to that if your child is moving up from 5th grade into 6th grade. Now, coming up, we're going to be kicking off our fall semester of our PAX small group ministry, and we still need some leaders. We have a good number right now. We've increased to about 16 groups currently. We'd like to hit 22. So if you're on the fence about leading a group or would like to have more information about that, let me know. You can email me at rusty@journeyshepardsville.com. Signups will begin for PAC Ministries August 14th, which is my birthday. So the birthday present you can give me is to sign up for a PAC or to lead a PAC. For everything else that's going on at Journey, be sure to download the Journey app, the Apple Store, or the Google Play Store. Now, we have one final thing that we're going to talk about for a few minutes, and that is something that, even 5 years ago, it wasn't really something that was on most of our radars. But with the advent of the coronavirus pandemic, we all became pretty intimately acquainted with digital church, right? Digital church, watching sermons online, watching services online, worshiping online week after week. A new study has just come out, and it has found that 41% of millennial Christians, so that would include all of us, right? April, what year were you born?
I'm not a millennial.
Are you a Gen
79.
X? So you're a Gen Xer.
Yep.
Okay. Add the rest of us. So you're going to be the outlier here.
Okay.
So you can.
Penny's not a millennial.
Yes, I am.
Were you born in 80?
81.
Oh, then you're a millennial.
Yeah.
Yes. It's
I thought we were in the
Calm
gap.
down.
No, we're in the gap.
No,
it
you're
was
not.
80 to
I
82
know that
is
you
in the
don't.
gap.
I know that you don't want to be
No,
labeled a millennial.
this was in the New York Times. There was an article, and there's a 2-year gap period where they don't fit in either one. We're gonna
I
talk
kind of
about
agree
this
with
next
that,
time.
actually.
Because I do not fit it with the Gen X, and I do not fit with the millennials.
What's wrong with Gen X?
A lot.
Whatever.
Your shirt.
Shut up. My shirt is awesome.
Okay. For the sake of this podcast today, you are millennials. So a new study has found that 41% of millennial Christians in the United States have, quote, consumed religious or spiritual digital content at least once a month over the last 3 years. So the question that I want to kind of discuss is, how has the digital church or the digital spiritual experience helped us, or has it hurt us? How has it hurt us? And then I've got one final question is, would you go to a metaverse church where you put on the VR
No.
headset and you walk in and there's a little avatar that greets you? Hi, welcome to Journey Christian Church. We're so glad you're here today.
I would actually do that.
I would
I
so
totally
not
would
do
too.
that. No.
But
way.
let's talk about that. The digital spiritual experience. How has it helped you personally, or has it?
I mean, it's nice to be able to see what other people are doing and all that. I know we have a girl that's actually a family member of ours who watches our church online every week. She lives like 2.5 hours away. So there's the good of it. I think the bad of it is you don't get that connection, like that one-on-one that you would get walking into buildings.
You would if you walked into a metaverse church.
No, you would not. You would if you walk into this church because I'm giving you a hug. See?
Okay. So you can either avoid hugs.
Nope. Come get them.
And go
Or
to
come and get 'em.
metaverse.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's okay, I guess. It's not really my thing. I like worship, and
Mhm.
worshiping at home is just, I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. Maybe people will get into it, but to me, it's just, I don't know. It's a big part of church for me. And I think that being around people is a big part of church for me. So it would be very difficult to do that a lot.
Yeah, I think that, because I've thought about that. Like, if people are watching, and nobody does this, I think churches have tried to do this. If people are like watching, like if you have like your friend that lives or family members a couple hours away, and they're getting like a group of people together and watching it and like building community within that, like I could see some benefits to that. I still also see some problems because then they're not really connected to the church
Right.
that they're attending. Because I do think that, the whole point of church is, and this is the original, is it's an assembly. It's people gathering together.
Mhm.
And I think I think that digital church is okay for a starting place. And I think that we've even had people that have come that said they checked us out online, then they came. We've also had people leave to go to other churches because they checked them out online and then they left. But that's neither here nor there. But I do think that there's something about, when your father dies, when your cousin dies, when you're going through a divorce, when your kids get into all kinds of stuff that you never thought they would, like the screen's not going to help you,
Mm-mm.
and honestly, to be honest with you, half the time it's not the pastor that's helping you. It's the people from your church, from your small group that you've connected with. And obviously as a pastor, I'll be there to walk through it. But I mean, I think that is the danger. So I could see benefits if like people were getting together and watching it and kind of creating their own little community to support each other. But if you're disconnected from the greater body, then I think that kind of becomes the concern for me. And we've already talked about this is the loneliest generation.
Mhm.
And so just giving them digital church without some type of connection to other people, I mean, makes it even more, I think, concerning and lonely.
Well, which so I think that it's twofold, because the other side of this is not just digital church, but it's the ability to spiritual podcasts to engage with those, because to some people that's their sermon is on top of whatever they do on Sundays, they're consuming other sources of spiritual discipline, or however you want to phrase it. But I do think it's goofy, the idea of like, okay, I'm going to put on some VR headset and I'm going to create a little avatar that kind of looks like me. Maybe anytime I play a video game and I can create my own character, I always make sure that he's a very, very built, attractive man. And so that's what my avatar would be. instead of the short, stocky guy I am. And I do think that, as silly as it might seem, a metaverse experience where, because you can get on and you can actually view them, and you don't have to have VR goggles. You can do it from your desktop. It's set up like you walk into a church and there's a greeter and there is a bulletin board for announcements, and then you walk into a sanctuary where other people are sitting, and it's all on screen at that point. So it's kind of like being at a satellite campus, which, you're in the multiverse or the metaverse, whatever. But it's better than nothing, I guess.
It is. I think it just is, and I'm going to sound like the old man here. I never thought I'd say this, but it just seems like another escape of reality.
Yes.
And I think that's the concern, is that we live, not just the Generation Z by the way, we're the Zennials. Just so we know, we're the Zennials.
Did you sit and look that up?
Yeah, New York Times. So from 1980 to 1983 is the Zennials. So we don't fit
He's
Gen X.
trying hard, isn't
He
he?
is.
I don't want to be
a millennial.
The New York Times said it, and then the Washington Post also put it. So those are my trusted news sources. Anyway, I think that we have not just those generations. We have everybody trying to escape reality through all different ways. And like I said, I could see pros to it. Like, and if that's the only way we're going to get people in church, but I also see a lot of concern of it just continuing that pattern of, I pick on them a lot. I do see a lot of younger millennials, if I am one, a lot of younger millennials, and especially Generation Z, who have no interpersonal skills, have no ways of building real relationships. I mean, they can't even answer the phone, Ryan. And so, it's like, it is concerning that we're catering to that versus making them have to. And I think the other thing of it is, I'm a big proponent of intergenerational in church. Like, I've always said this, the only way to know what someone that's in their 60s knows is to be 60. You can't at 40 years old have the wisdom of a 60-year-old person, because you just haven't experienced that, and at the same time, I don't understand the world of a 20-year-old. And so we need all of these people coming together if the church is really going to do it. And to go back to our other thing, really answer the needs that our country has. And I think that a lot of people feel isolated and all that, but so meta church, whatever, but I feel like that may further that narrative versus making people come together and actually encounter each other, even if they see the world differently and have different opinions on, those type of things.
I'm going to create an avatar for all of you.
No,
Here
you're
we go
not.
again.
And I'm going to put it on the show notes, and people can make it their own emoji for you when you call.
My son at the Lego store right now is real cool. You can build your own characters. It's like 3 of them for $9 or something like that. And he built one for everybody in our family. And they actually look like us. It's pretty cool.
That's fun.
He's hilarious.
He is a funny kid.
I love that kid. All right. Well, that's our show for today. If you have questions, comments, complaints, concerns, email April@journeyshepherdsville.com. For everything else, you can email podcast@journeyshepherdsville.com. We will see you or talk to you soon.